Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 92 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4. And we're in chapter 31, the last chapter of the fourth canto. And the chapter is titled Narada Instructs the Prachetas. Sections from verse 8 to verse 22, and we're at verse 15, and it's Narada Muni preaching to, instructing the Prachetas. So here we go. First of all, though, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyas cha kripas sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right, here we go, devotees. Verse 15. During the rainy season, water is generated from the sun, and in due course of time, during the summer season, the very same water is again absorbed by the sun. Similarly, all living entities, moving and inert, are generated from the earth, and again, after some time, they all return to the earth as dust. Similarly, everything emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in due course of time, everything enters into Him again. Let's have a look at the purport here. Prabhupada explains that the impersonalist philosophers, because of their lack of knowledge, they can't understand how everything comes from the Lord and then merges with Him again after a while. In this regard, Prabhupada quotes verse 40 of Brahma Samhita as a confirmation. Yasya prabha prabhavato jagadanda koti koti shvashesha vasudadi vibhuti binam tad brahma nishkalam anantam ashesha rupam ashesha bhutam govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. And Prabhupada's comment is that the transcendental rays emanate from the body of Krishna, and within those rays, which are the Brahmana effulgence, everything is existing. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 4, where Krishna says, Matstani Sarvabhutani, to the effect that although Krishna is not personally present everywhere, His energy is the cause of all creation. The entire cosmic manifestation is nothing but a display of Krishna's energy. So Prabhupada makes the point that in this verse, two examples given are very vivid. First is, during the rainy season, the rain, by rejuvenating the production of vegetables, foodstuffs, so the rain enables man and animals to obtain living energy. If there's no rain, food becomes scarce, and there's famine, and man and animals, they simply die. So that's one point. And second point is that all the vegetables, as well as the moving living entities, are originally products of the earth. They come from the earth, and later again they merge into the earth. So similarly, the total material energy is generated from the body of Krishna, and at that time when the generating is happening, the entire cosmic manifestation is visible. But when Krishna winds up his energy, everything vanishes. And Prabhupada, it's interesting, to explain the same idea, but in a different way, Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita verse 48. Yasyaika nishvasita kala matavalambya jivanti loma vilaja jagadandanatha Vishnu mahansa iha yasya kala vishesho govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. And Prabhupada paraphrases, this entire material creation comes from the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and at the time of annihilation again enters into him. This process of creation and dissolution is made possible by the breathing of Mahavishnu, who is only a plenary portion of Krishna. He's not exactly on the same level as the Lord himself. Right, so let's go on to verse 16. Just as the sunshine is non-different from the sun, the cosmic manifestation is also non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the senses are active, they appear to be part and parcel of the body, but when the body is asleep, their activities are unmanifest. Similarly, the whole cosmic creation appears different and yet non-different from the Supreme Person. Okay, let's have a look at the purport here. There are 3 paragraphs at least. Is there more? There's 4 paragraphs. Anyway, let's have a look at the first paragraph. Prabhupada makes the important point, that this verse confirms the Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva philosophy of Lord Chaitanya. In other words, the philosophy has been around for a long time, but it was just given the particular title and really focused on by Lord Chaitanya, that the Lord is different from and not non-different from his creation. So a previous verse said that the Lord, like the root of a tree, is the original cause of everything. And it also explained he's all-pervasive. Yes, he's within everything in the universe. So, since the energy of the Lord is not different from him, the cosmic manifestation is also non-different from him. Although it appears different, so many features and planets and this and that, it may appear to be quite different, but actually in principle it's non-different. Just like the sunshine is not different from the sun itself. Yeah, but it's also different. One may be in the sunshine, but not on the sun itself. So therefore, those living in the material world, they're living on the bodily rays of the Lord, but they can't see him personally in the material condition. So we go on to the second paragraph. So here the word, Prabhupada refers to the word padam in the verse. Let's just have a quick look here. What does padam? Okay. Place of habitation. place of habitation. So Prabhupada says in this verse, the word padam indicates the place where the Lord resides. And of course the proprietor of a house may live in one room of the house, but actually the entire house belongs to him. And Prabhupada gives the example of Buckingham Palace. A king, King Charles, may live in one room in Buckingham Palace, but the whole palace is his property. He doesn't have to live in every room for the palace to be his. So, yeah. Anyway, on to the third paragraph. The sunshine is light, the sun globe is light, and the sun god is light. But the sunshine is not identical with the sun god or the sun globe. That's why we can be sitting here in the sunshine or outside in the sunshine. But the sun is way away. So, on every planet, trees grow, change colors due to sunshine. So, like this, the entire material world is dependent on the sun, produced by the sun, which is the cause, and as such, the sun is inherent in the effects. So similarly, Krishna is the cause of all causes, and the effects coming from him are permeated by the original cause. He permeates everything which is an effect from him. So therefore the entire cosmic manifestation should be understood as the expanded energy of the Lord. When we sleep, the senses are inactive, but it doesn't mean that they're not there, that they're absent. When you wake up, your senses become active again. So similarly, the cosmic creation is sometimes manifest, sometimes not. Bhutva bhutva praliyate, as Bhagavad Gita 8:19 says. So the point is, when the cosmic manifestation is dissolved, it's in a kind of a sleeping state, an inactive state. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, whether the cosmic manifestation is active or inactive, the energy of the Supreme Lord is always existing. Thus the words appearance and disappearance apply only to the cosmic manifestation. On we go, devotees, to verse 17. My dear kings, sometimes in the sky there are clouds, sometimes there's darkness, and sometimes there's illumination. The appearance of all these takes place consecutively. Similarly, in the Supreme Absolute, the modes of passion, darkness, and goodness appear as consecutive energies. Sometimes they appear and sometimes they disappear. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying that darkness, illumination, and clouds sometimes appear and sometimes disappear. But even when they've disappeared, the potency is still there. It's always existing. So in the sky, sometimes we see clouds, sometimes rain, snow, sometimes night, day, illumination, darkness. They all exist because of the sun, but the sun is unaffected by all the changes going on between these different things, clouds, rain, snow, etc. So similarly, although the Lord is the original cause of the cosmic manifestation, he's unaffected by material existence. Prabhupada says that Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 4 confirms this. Bhumya apolo nalo vayu kamano bodhirevacha ahankara ityame bina prakritir ashtada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. Altogether these 8 comprise my separated material energies. We go into the second paragraph. Although the elements, material, physical elements, are the energy of the Lord, but they're separate. So the Lord is not affected by their conditions, material conditions. Prabhupada refers to Vedanta Sutra, which confirms Janmad Yasya Yataha, Srimad Bhagavatam 111, that the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the material world is due to the existence of the Lord. But he's not affected by the changes which take place within the world. So Prabhupada makes the point, this is indicated by the word pravaha, which means emanation. As the sun's always shining, not affected by clouds or darkness, the Lord is always present in his spiritual energy and isn't affected by material emanations or conditions. And Prabhupada refers to Brahma Samhita, verse 1, which confirms Ishvara Parama Krishna, that Krishna, Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin. And he is the prime cause of all causes. So he's the remote cause. And material nature is the immediate cause. Let's have a look here. So Prabhupada goes on to say that if we think that Prakriti is the cause of everything, material nature, it's like understanding the nipples on the neck of a goat to be the sources of milk. They're just pieces of flesh or whatever hanging. They don't produce any milk at all. So the material nature is the immediate cause of the cosmic manifestation, but the original cause is Krishna. And Prabhupada gives another example, the example of a potter making clay pots. The potter's the original cause. He takes the clay and some water and whatever else and puts it on the wheel and spins the wheel, and this way makes pots. And Prabhupada says unintelligent people will think that the wheel makes the pots, but actually the potter makes the pots using the wheel. Yeah. So the potter supplies the earth, moves the wheel. He's really the one behind it. So Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 10, famous verse we've come across many times here in the Bhagavatam. Maya jakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and producing all moving and unmoving beings. In the third paragraph, Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Supreme Lord casts his glance over material energy, and his glance agitates the 3 modes of nature. Creation then takes place. The conclusion is that nature is not the cause of the material manifestation. The Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes. So on we go, devotees, to verse 18. Because the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes, he is the supersoul of all individual living entities, and he exists as both the remote and immediate cause. Since he's aloof from the material emanations, he's free from their interactions and is Lord of material nature. You should therefore engage in his devotional service, thinking yourself qualitatively one with him. Let's not forget this is Narada Muni. He's advising the Prachetas. Okay, so Prabhupada explains in the purport. Let's just have a look here. According to Vedic calculations, there are 3 causes of creation: time, the ingredients, and the creator. Combined, they're called Tritayatmaka, the 3 causes. So everything in the material world is created by these 3 causes. But the thing is, they're all found in the Lord. Therefore, he's Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of the causes, or he's the cause of all causes. So therefore, Narada advises the Prachetas to worship the direct cause, the Lord himself, to water the root of the tree. We saw that example given a few verses ago. So Narada says we should do devotional service, we should serve him. Even pious activities can be done in his service. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna Bhakti Kaile Savakrama Kritahoy. When one worships the Lord, Krishna, in devotional service, one automatically performs all other pious activities. And Prabhupada says that the words Swatejasa Dwasta Guna Pravaham are significant. By his spiritual energy, he is aloof from the material emanations. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So he's never affected by material qualities, even though they come from him, from his spiritual energy. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, those who are really conversant with this knowledge can utilize everything for the service of the Lord, because nothing in this material world is unconnected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 19, by showing mercy to all living entities, being satisfied somehow or other, and controlling the senses from sense enjoyment, one can very quickly satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janardhan. Yeah, so these are some of the ways that the Lord can be satisfied by his devotee. Being merciful to living entities, giving them Krishna consciousness. Being satisfied just with whatever comes. And also, third thing, controlling the senses. As not engaging in sense gratification. These are ways that you can satisfy the Lord. And Prabhupada explains this in the first paragraph of the purport. So knowing these 3 things, we should engage in devotional service. And particularly those who are truly learned, they should preach Krishna consciousness all over the world to help people make their lives successful. Second paragraph, the word Sarva Bhuteshu is significant. Sarva Bhuteshu means all living entities. So it's significant because it applies not just to humans, but all living entities. The devotee can help all of them, not just the humans. Prabhupada mentions that by chanting you can benefit the trees and animals and insects. This point was made by Haridas Thakur, actually. Yes. So that's merciful to all the living entities. And while spreading Krishna consciousness, we should be satisfied in all conditions. Prabhupada quotes Bhagavatam 6:17-28, Narayana Parasarve, spoken by Lord Shiva immediately after the cursing of Vritrasura. So Prabhupada paraphrases the translation here. It doesn't matter to the pure devotee if he has to go to hell to preach. The Supreme Lord lives in the heart of a hog, although the Lord is in Vaikuntha. Even while preaching in hell, a pure devotee remains a pure devotee by his constant association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, but to attain this state, you have to control your senses. And if your senses are engaged in devotional service, then your senses are automatically controlled. Verse 20, being completely cleansed of all material desires, the devotees are freed from all mental contamination. Thus they can always think of the Lord constantly and address him very feelingly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing himself to be controlled by his devotees, does not leave them for a second, just as the sky overhead never becomes invisible. So Prabhupada makes the point that from the previous verse, the three ways which were mentioned by which we can satisfy the Lord. So from that verse, it's clear that the Lord is quickly satisfied by the activities of his devotees. The devotee is always absorbed in thinking of the Lord, and so therefore his heart is free from material desires. Yes. So, of course, ordinary living entities, their minds are full of material desires. But when the living entity is cleansed through engagement in devotional service, one doesn't think of anything material. Then you come to the perfectional stage and you see the Lord in the heart. And as soon as you come to that point, then you cannot be contaminated by the modes. Under the modes, of course, people want so many things, so much sense gratification. But as soon as they perceive the Lord in the heart, all material desires vanish. And then they can think of the Lord constantly. And in this way, they become completely dependent on the lotus feet of the Lord. Prabhupada quotes Shikshastakam verse 5, where Lord Chaitanya prays to Krishna, I am your eternal servant. Somehow I've fallen into this material world, but please pick me up and fix me just as a speck of dust at your lotus feet. And Prabhupada continues that similarly, Narottam Das Thakur prays. Narottam Das Thakur prays, Hahananda Sutta, Vrishabhanu Sutta Duta, Karunakaraha E Bara, Narottama Dasakaya, Nateliha Rangapaya, Tomavine Kayachayama, which means, my dear Lord, you are now present with the daughter of King Vrishabhanu, Srimati Radharani. Now both of you please be merciful upon me. Don't kick me away because I have no shelter other than you. And then there's a second paragraph. In this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes dependent on his devotee. Even though the Lord's invincible, he's conquered by his pure devotee. And he enjoys being dependent on the devotee, just like Krishna enjoyed being dependent on Mother Yashoda's mercy. So, yes, Prabhupada gives the example, sometimes a king may engage a joker, and in the process of joking, the king is sometimes insulted. Prabhupada tells the story of the famous, Akbar's famous joker, Gopal Ban. Gopal Ban. One time, Akbar, who's the emperor, he said to Gopal Ban, he said, "What's the difference between you and a fool?" And Gopal Ban measured the distance between himself and the king. It's like 2 meters or something. And he says, "About 2 meters." So he's mocking the king, the emperor, but the emperor enjoyed it. So everyone worships the Lord with great reverence. It's very formal and, it's not very exciting, in other words. So sometimes the Lord wants to enjoy some chastisement from a devotee. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in this way, the relationship eternally existing between the Lord and his devotees is fixed, just like the sky overhead. Okay. Verse 21. The Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes very dear to those devotees who have no material possessions, but are fully happy in possessing the devotional service of the Lord. Indeed, the Lord relishes the devotional activities of such devotees. Those who are puffed up with material education, wealth, aristocracy, and fruit of activity are very proud of possessing material things, and they often deride the devotees. Even if such people offer the Lord worship, the Lord never accepts it. Just see. Sure. That's amazing. Yeah, the Lord never accepts their worship. So, continuing the mood of the previous verse, Prabhupada begins the purport by again saying that the Lord is dependent on his pure devotees, doesn't accept any offering from someone who's not a devotee. Of course, the pure devotee feels he doesn't possess anything material. He's very happy just having devotional service, possessing devotional service. Sometimes the devotee may appear to be materially poor, but because he's spiritually advanced and enriched, he's very dear to the Lord. So like this, the devotees are free from attachment to family, society, friendship, children, etc. But they're always happy to possess the lotus feet of the Lord. And the Lord understands the position of the devotee and how the devotee feels. So if a person derides a pure devotee, he's never recognized by the Lord or accepted as one of the Lord's people. So in other words, Prabhupada makes the point, and it's so important, the Lord never excuses one who offends a pure devotee. And there are many examples of this in history. A classic example in the 9th canto is Devasa Muni. He offended Ambarish Maharaj, and he appealed to the Lord, please protect me. Please forgive me for this offense to Ambarish. But the Lord wouldn't excuse him. So therefore those on the path of liberation should be very careful, very, very careful not to offend a pure devotee. Verse 22. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient, he becomes dependent on his devotees. He doesn't care for the goddess of fortune, nor for the kings and demigods who are after the favors of the goddess of fortune. Where is that person who is actually grateful and will not worship the personality of Godhead? So Prabhupada makes the point, first of all, that Lakshmi is always worshipped by materialistic people, but she is always worshipping the Lord. And she's always trying to please and serve the Lord, even though he doesn't need her service. In fact, Brahma Samhita says the Lord is worshipped by hundreds and thousands and even hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune, but he doesn't need their service because he can produce millions of them through his spiritual energy. So it's actually out of his mercy only that he becomes dependent on his devotees. So Prabhupada raises the question, what an important question. How fortunate is a devotee who is favored in that way by the Lord, that the Lord becomes dependent on him. How fortunate is that devotee. And what ungrateful devotee will not worship the Lord and perform devotional service. So the devotee can't forget his obligation to the Lord for a moment. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says both the Lord and the devotee are rasagya, full of transcendental humor or transcendental mellows. Their relationship is never material. It's a transcendental fact. And there in that relationship, there are 8 kinds of transcendental ecstasies, bhavas, sattvika bhavas, bhava, anubhava, sthayi bhava, etc. They discussed the nectar of devotion. Those who are unaware of the position of the Lord, of the living entity in the Lord, they think that the relationship, the attraction between the Lord and his devotee is just a creation of Maya. It's just another material relationship. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, factually such attachment is natural, both for the Supreme Lord and for the devotee, and it cannot be accepted as material. Right, okay. So on we go to section 4, which is just the one verse 23. Narada Muni departs for Brahmaloka. So the verse, the great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, Sri Narada Muni, the son of Lord Brahma, thus described all these relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the Prachetas. Afterward, he returned to Brahmaloka. So there's very short purport, 2 sentences. Let me just read it. One has to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead from a pure devotee. The Prachetas got this opportunity from the great sage Narada, who told them of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. So now the 5th section is just verse 24. The Prachetas achieved the highest destination. Verse 24, hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, they advanced to the ultimate destination. So let's have a look at the purport. So we can see that by hearing the glories of the Lord from Narada, from a realized devotee, the Prachetas easily got strong attachment for the Lord. Then remembering his lotus feet at the end of their lives, they went to Vaikuntha, Vishnu Loka. So it's certain then, anyone who always hears his glories and thinks of his lotus feet will reach the supreme destination. To confirm this, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 1865, Man mana bhava mad bhakto. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage unto me. Thus you'll come to me without fail. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. So next verse, next section 6, is also one verse, verse 25, which is titled, The Discussion about the Descendants of Swayambhuva's First Son Concludes. Okay. So verse 25, My dear Vidura, I've told you everything you wanted to know about the conversation between Narada and the Prachetas, the conversation describing the glories of the Lord. I've related this as far as possible. And again, there's another extremely short purport. I'll just read it. Srimad Bhagavatam describes the glories of the Lord and his devotees. Because the whole subject matter is the glorification of the Lord, naturally the glorification of his devotees automatically follows. So we go on. The next section is verses 26 and 27, 2 verses. And we call this section Discussion about Swayambhuva's second son begins. Let's have a look here. I'll just read straight through. Shukadev Goswami continued, O best of kings, Parikshit, I've now finished telling about the descendants of the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, Uttanapad. Now I shall try to relate the activities of the descendants of Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Please hear them attentively. Let's have a look at this very short purport. In fact, let's just read it. Short purport to this verse. Dhruva Maharaj was the son of King Uttanapad. And as far as the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj or King Uttanapad are concerned, their activities have been described up to the point of the Prachetas. Now Sri Shukadev Goswami desires to describe the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Verse 27, although Maharaj Priyavrata received instructions from the great sage Narada, he still engaged in ruling the earth. After fully enjoying material possessions, he divided his property among his sons. He then attained a position by which he could return home back to Godhead. Section 8 is verses 28, 29, and 30. And we call this Vidura starts for Hastinapur. Let me just read the verses, 3 verses. 28, My dear king, in this way, after hearing the transcendental messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees from the great sage Maitreya, Vidura was overwhelmed with ecstasy. With tears in his eyes, he immediately fell down at the lotus feet of his guru, his spiritual master. He then fixed the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. 29. Sri Vidura said, O great mystic, O greatest of all devotees, by your causeless mercy, I have been shown the path of liberation from this world of darkness. By following this path, a person liberated from the material world can return home back to Godhead. 30. Shukadev Goswami continued, Vidura thus offered obeisances unto the great sage Maitreya, and, taking his permission, started for the city of Hastinapur to see his own kinsman, although he had no material desires. Right, so let's go back through the section. Verses and purports. Verses 28 to 30, Vidura starts for Hastinapur. 28. My dear king, in this way, after hearing the transcendental messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees from the great sage Maitreya, Vidura was overwhelmed with ecstasy. With tears in his eyes, he immediately fell down at the lotus feet of his guru, his spiritual master. He then fixed the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. And this is very interesting. Prabhupada in the purport says, this is a sign of associating with great devotees. If you get that association, if you get instructions from great devotees, you become ecstatic. Prahlad Maharaj says in the Bhagavatam, 7.532, I'll just read the translation, that one cannot become a perfect devotee of the Lord without having touched the lotus feet of a great devotee. One who has nothing to do with this material world is called niskinchana. Yes, so Prabhupada explains the process. What is the process of self-realization? It means surrendering to a bona fide spiritual master and taking the dust from his lotus feet on your head. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus one advances on the path of transcendental realization. Vidura had this relationship with Maitreya, and he attained the results. 29. Sri Vidura said, O great mystic, O greatest of all devotees, by your causeless mercy, I've been shown the path of liberation from this world of darkness. By following this path, a person liberated from the material world can return back home, back to Godhead. So again, it's a short purport. Prabhupada makes the point that this material world is called tama, dark, and the spiritual world is called light. And the Vedas enjoin, we should get out of the darkness and go to the kingdom of light. So information of that kingdom of light we can get by the mercy of a self-realized devotee. Then you also have to get free of material desires. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as soon as one frees himself from material desires and associates with a liberated person, the path back home, back to Godhead, is clear. Verse 30. Shukadev Goswami continued, Vidura thus offered obeisances unto the great sage Maitreya, and taking his permission, started for the city of Hastinapur to see his own kinsmen, although he had no material desires. In other words, he wasn't attached to his family. So here we have it, devotees. Vidura and Maitreya are parting company. Yes. Maitreya is going his way, Vidura is going his way back to Hastinapur. So, and that's the end of their discussion. What an amazing discussion it's been. So anyway, in the purport, Prabhupada makes the point, we just sort of mentioned it. When a saintly person wants to see his relatives, it's not because of material desires. but it's because he wants to instruct them, to help them. So, other than Dhritarashtra, Vidura's family died in the Battle of Kurukshetra. So he wanted to see him, Dhritarashtra, to deliver him from Maya. So, yeah, that, as Prabhupada says, when a saintly person like Vidura sees his relatives, it's just to deliver them. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Vidura thus offered his respectful obeisances to his spiritual master and departed for the city of Hastinapur, the kingdom of the Kauravas. Okay, devotees, now last section, which is the last verse of the last chapter of the fourth canto. This is the end of the fourth canto right now. So section 9, verse 31, we call it Blessings for Those Who Hear of the Great Devotee Kings. So it's just a verse, there's no purport. O King, so this is Shukadev addressing King Parikshit. O King, those who hear these topics about kings who are completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead obtain without difficulty a long life, wealth, good reputation, good fortune, and ultimately the opportunity to return home back to Godhead. Hare Krishna devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.